Now on BBC4, get out your glad rags and your sky-high heels for a celebration of the trailblazing queens of British pop. In 2009, it seems as if men are running out of things to say. Female artists suddenly rule the charts. But they're far from the first to balance beehives, give up their private lives, or sing heartbroken soul. This golden generation didn't get here alone. Women's lives weren't always in colour. The women who came before them have not only been there and done that, but they've got the back catalogue to prove it. This week we celebrate the trailblazers, the stars that lit us up from the early 60s to the late 70s. We give you our first Queens of British Pop. Our first queen is the woman Elton John described as the greatest white singer there has ever been. The shy schoolgirl who grew up into the epitome of glamour, soul and late-night heartbreak. Dusty Springfield.
Left alone with just a memory.
Dusty was she was heavyweight, you know. She paved the way for, girls like Leona and any other female that's followed from these shores. She was a serious musician.
Well, Dusty in the 60s was as big as you could get. There was nobody bigger than Dusty Springfield. She was the female voice.
She's an icon. There were no other soul singers coming from England at the time, especially that had that many amazing songs.
Dusty was one of the greatest ever to do my song.
Who did we all fall in love with? Dusty Springfield. Who did we all want as our girlfriend? Dusty Springfield. Whose songs did we all sing? Dusty Springfield.
This is Mary Catherine Bernadette Isabel O'Brien from North London, who told the nuns at her convent school that one day she would be a jazz singer. At the dawn of the 60s, she adopted her childhood nickname, Dusty, and joining with her brother Tom, formed the Springfields. The Springfields played family-friendly folk, but it was clear Dusty was made of more soulful stuff. By late 1963, the Beatles were making Britain the centre of the pop universe, and the now solo Dusty was at the heart of it.
I remember all the press at the time, the fact that Dusty had left the Springfields to go out on her own was big news. Dusty Springfield had to go out there all on her own and become a big star with the help of nobody, and that's down to her.
I don't know what it is that makes me love you so.
When I think of her now, it's a very strong image of a woman with that candy floss hair back combed up the wazoo, the black eyes and the absolutely pale lips. In fact, she would sing in a certain way so that her lip gloss wouldn't move.
It's crazy, but it's true. I only wanna be with you.
She might have created one of the trademark images of the 60s, but it was a mask as well as a uniform.
She was actually very insecure. So the makeup and the hair and the costumes and everything, all of that was a mask that she could hide behind. Once she went on stage, she was Dusty. When she came off stage, she was Mary.
be sure. Mary O'Brien was very shy, very timid, wouldn't really, perhaps have spoken up in the same way that Dusty Springfield did.
I started singing when I was 17 and purposely set about creating somebody else, Dusty Springfield.
I just don't know what to do with myself.
Despite her insecurities, in the early 60s everything was coming up Dusty. She was the first act on Top of the Pops. She presented the latest acts on Ready Steady Go, and even had her own show on the BBC.
Dusty will always be, for me, of that period, the greatest. For her looks, for her charm, for her voice.
I don't know just what to do with myself. I don't know just...
She was a proper singer, a full bow singer. Even though she was influenced by soul singers, she had her own sound. Once you hear her voice, you know it's Dusty Springfield. She was great to work with. We got on really well together, and we had the same. We were influenced by the same music.
Dusty so loved black American music that she wanted to champion Motown and its then unknown acts to a British audience, and pitched it as a TV special.
Watching the sound of Motown, introduced by Dusty Springfield. And now, the Supremes.
It was a very brave move in terms of nobody knew who the hell these artists were. So Dusty said, well, what if I, introduce it and become part of it?
My thrill and delight was when Dusty decided she'd do Wishing and Hoping with me and Betty and Rosalind. We had never really blended our voices together, and it was a thrill to see how easy it was to do and how much fun we had doing it.
So if you're thinking about way to run in, all you gotta do is hold and kick it and love it, twig it and love it.
Her instincts were absolutely right, because after the special had aired, Motown really did explode. People then suddenly went, oh my God, this music is really good.
The look of love is in your eyes.
There was no female artist bigger than Dusty, and no one more difficult to please than Dusty the recording artist.
She didn't want to be in the control room with me or the engineer. She wanted a separate control room to hear playbacks. So I was loving it, how she sounded. But getting her happy seemed to be harder.
Underneath the facade, I really wasn't very grown up at all, and was apt to lapse into all sorts of tantrums if things didn't go my way. And very, very impatient and extremely hard, mainly on myself.
I think with the insecurities that she had and her own demons, I'm sure, that she was fighting, it became a reflection, all her feelings, what was inside her.
She was a tortured soul, and sometimes I guess that torture comes across in her performance.
If you go away on this summer day.
She was very sensitive, extremely vulnerable.
All the birds that flew in the summer skies when our love was new and our hearts were high.
And that was very attractive quality. And you could hear it in her voice, that great heartrending vocals that she would give.
If you go away, if you go away.
Whatever the public wanted to know about Dusty's life, she didn't want to tell them.
We had the same manager briefly, and in fact in 1964 he decided to link us romantically. So on the front page of the Daily Mirror was a picture of myself and Dusty. Are they engaged or what? Which is ridiculous.
Every interview would go to her sexuality, and she said it's got nothing to do with the records I make. Like I'm number 2 in the charts, and they want to know who I'm screwing.
Tell me what to do.
At the time, the insiders knew that Dusty was gay, and but nobody, people, the general public didn't. They do now, and it's no big deal anymore. But in those days, if somebody was gay, you wouldn't publicize it. It wasn't something to be talked about, because it was voodoo in those days.
At the end of the 60s, Dusty signed with Atlantic Records to record with American soul musicians, a decision which didn't please all Dusty fans.
People wanted those big ballads, didn't they, from her? And it must have been quite difficult for her to move on.
Billy Ray was a preacher's son. When his daddy would visit, he'd come along.
When Dusty in Memphis came out, it wasn't that well received at first. And now, all these years later, it's always in the best 50 albums of all time.
Lord knows to my surprise, the only boy who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only one who could ever teach me was the son of a...
Subsequent recordings didn't even chart, and Dusty's career started to look as anchored in the 60s as her eyeliner. But in the late 80s, the Pet Shop Boys stepped in and provided Dusty with the perfect setting for her voice again.
Since you went away, I've been hanging around. I've been wondering why. I've been down, went away.
Certainly for us, the public, it was nice to hear Dusty again and, to hear her talent. And thank goodness, really, that she had that period before she went.
But it was a last goodbye. Dusty was diagnosed with breast cancer and lost her battle in 1999.
Maybe she's bigger in our consciousness now that she's not here anymore. God, I wish you were around still.
I think she'll always be with us. I don't think there's anybody that ever sounded any better than Dusty Springfield.
If Dusty is the consummate professional who started in the 50s, our next queen is a natural who walked barefoot off the factory